They came with religion in one hand and bullets in the other, with deception in their heart. They claimed to bring civilization, but what they unleashed was terror. Massacres hidden behind military reports. Entire kingdoms erased from memory. And to this day, many of these stories remain buried, not by time, but by design. Welcome to Real African History, the channel where we uncover the buried truths that textbooks, movies, and colonial narratives have tried to erase. Today, we reveal the brutal African battles the West tried to erase. These were not just battles of guns and swords, but of betrayal, resistance, and survival. These are not just stories of bloodshed. They are stories of courage, of defiance, of Africans who refused to bow down, even in the face of machine guns, scorched earth, and brutal colonial punishments. So, grab your seat, turn up the volume, because what you're about to hear is the truth they hoped would never be told. 1. Omdurman, the slaughter disguised as victory. Sudan 1898, British versus Mahdi Sudanese. The sun blazed over the deserts of Sudan in 1898. Two armies stood facing each other. On one side, 8,000 British soldiers and 17,000 Egyptian allies. On the other, over 50,000 Sudanese warriors, the last defenders of a powerful Mahdiist revolution. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. The British had Maxim guns, early machine guns capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute. The Sudanese, spears, swords, and unmatched courage. In just a few hours, over 11,000 Sudanese were killed. British losses, less than 50 dead. Winston Churchill, then a young officer, was there. He would later write about the blood-soaked sand and the waves of African warriors charging into bullets. But few asked why the Sudanese fought with such passion. They were not savages. They were defending their land, their faith, their dignity. Yet the world celebrated it as a great British victory. The truth? It was genocide with a military medal. 2. Maji Rebellion, the War of Fire and Water. German East Africa, Tanzania, 1905 to 1907. It started with a whisper, a prophecy that a magical water, called Maji, would protect African warriors from bullets. What followed was one of the most massive uprisings in East African history. The people had enough. Forced labor, heavy taxes, cotton quotas. Germany had turned Tanzanian villages into plantations of pain. From the south to the center of German East Africa, more than 20 ethnic groups united. With sacred water on their skin and weapons in hand, they rose. At first, the Germans were shocked, but their retaliation was unimaginable. Entire villages were burned to the ground, crops destroyed, wells poisoned. More than 250,000 Africans died, not just from bullets, but from starvation. It was less a war, more a scorched earth extermination. And to this day, Germany has never fully apologized. 3. The Battle of Isandlwana, when spears shattered British pride. Zulu Kingdom, South Africa, 1879. It was supposed to be a walkover. The British Empire, with rifles, cannons, and military training, marched confidently into Zulu lands. But what they didn't count on was strategy, discipline, and Zulu genius. On January 22nd, 1879, more than 20,000 Zulu warriors surrounded a British camp at Isandlwana. Using the legendary horns of the bull formation, they attacked from all sides. In less than 6 hours, over 1,300 British soldiers lay dead. It was the worst defeat the British had ever suffered at the hands of a native army. And yet, history books often skim past this moment. Why? Because it shattered the myth of African inferiority. 4. The Hera Genocide. The desert became a grave. Namibia, 1904 to 1908. In 1904, the Hera people of Namibia rose up against German colonial rule. Years of land theft, forced labor, and brutal abuse had pushed them to the edge. Led by Chief Samuel Herero, the Hera launched a powerful revolt, killing over 100 German settlers and reclaiming territory. But Germany's response was nothing short of monstrous. General Lothar von Trotha issued an extermination order. Every Hera found within German borders, armed or unarmed, shall be shot. Tens of thousands of Hera men, women, and children were driven into the Kalahari Desert, without food or water. Nearly 80% of the Hera population died. Thousands more were placed in concentration camps, where they were worked, beaten, and starved to death. To this day, many historians call it the first genocide of the 20th century. Yet the world stayed silent, and Germany's apology came over 100 years later. Five, the Battle of Adwa, when Ethiopia broke the colonial script. Ethiopia, 1896. Not all battles ended in African defeat. In 1896, Italy tried to colonize Ethiopia, the last independent empire in Africa. But Emperor Menelik II had a different plan. He united the country's warriors, secured arms from Russia and France, and mobilized over 100,000 troops. At Adwa, Ethiopian and Italian forces clashed. The world expected Italy to win. Instead, Ethiopia crushed them. Over 7,000 Italian soldiers killed. Thousands captured. A colonial army humiliated. The victory shocked Europe. For the first time, an African nation had defeated a European power in a major war. Italy was forced to sign a treaty recognizing Ethiopian independence. Even today, Adwa remains a symbol of African pride, defiance, and the power of unity. Six, the Congo Free State Massacres, Leopold's private hell. Congo, DRC, 1885 to 1908. What if I told you one of the most brutal regimes in African history wasn't a government, but a private business owned by one European king? King Leopold II of Belgium called it the Congo Free State. But there was nothing free about it. His goal, rubber and ivory. His method, terror. Congolese men were forced to meet rubber quotas. If they failed, their hands were cut off, literally. Children, women, elders, no one was spared. It's estimated that 10 million Congolese people died during Leopold's reign. Entire villages were burned. Rivers ran red. And yet, it was all done in the name of civilizing Africa. To this day, many Belgian statues still stand. But who tells the stories of the millions silenced by the whip and the gun? 7. Battle of Quival, the turning point in southern Africa. Angola, 1987 to 1988. The Cold War wasn't just fought in Europe. Its bloodiest front lines were in Africa. In 1987, in the small Angolan town of Quival, Cuban and Angolan forces faced off against the apartheid-backed South African military. It was more than a battle. It was a struggle for Southern Africa's future. The South African army, backed by the US and its allies, came to crush Angola's socialist government and stop the spread of communism. But Fidel Castro sent 15,000 Cuban troops to assist Angola. The result? A standoff that changed history. South Africa was forced to retreat, marking the beginning of the end for apartheid and white minority rule. Nelson Mandela later said, Quival was the turning point for the liberation of our continent. Yet few outside Africa even know the name. 8. The Second Chimurenga, Zimbabwe's fight for liberation. Zimbabwe, 1966 to 1979. In the forests of Zimbabwe, a war was brewing. One of bullets and betrayal, of spirit and sacrifice. The white Rhodesian government, backed by British settlers, had declared unilateral independence, denying political power to the black majority. In response, groups like Xandla and Zipra launched a full-scale guerrilla war. Over a decade of jungle warfare, sabotage, and urban resistance, Rhodesia responded with brutal counterattacks, including massacres, chemical weapons, and assassinations. But the people did not back down. By 1979, the war had paralyzed the settler regime, and in 1980, Zimbabwe was born. The cost: tens of thousands dead. The legacy: a hard-won independence, with wounds that remain. Nine, Battle of Casablanca, civilian blood under French boots. Morocco, 1907. France said it was protecting European interests, but Morocco saw it as invasion. In 1907, a minor incident was used as an excuse by France to launch a full military assault on Casablanca. Warships bombarded the city for days. French troops landed and killed thousands, many of them unarmed civilians. Markets, mosques, and homes were turned into ruins. And when Morocco finally became a protectorate in 1912, the scars were still fresh. Yet in most history books, it's not even a chapter. Ten, the Battle of Tandeeb, the collapse of the mighty Songhai Empire. Mali, 1591, Songhai versus Morocco. The Songhai Empire was once the largest and most powerful empire in West Africa, ruling over vast trade networks from Timbuktu to Kano. But in 1591, Morocco, armed with European-supplied firearms, crossed the Sahara with a bold plan to conquer Songhai and control its gold trade. At Tandeeb, the armies met. The Songhai cavalry, proud and fearless, charged, but they had no answer for the Moroccan muskets and cannons. In just hours, the Songhai army was shattered. Gao, Timbuktu, and Jin fell one by one. The empire crumbled. What followed was chaos, economic collapse, political fragmentation, and centuries of instability. And yet Morocco never truly gained control. They came for gold, but left behind ashes. 11. Battle of Anfi, birth of the Mali Empire. Mali, 1235, Sundiata Keita versus Samunguru Kante. Before there was Mali, there was war. At the Battle of Anfi, a young prince named Sundiata Keita led a coalition of Mandinka warriors against the cruel Soso king Samunguru Kante. The Soso had terrorized the region for years, crushing tribes and burning villages. But Sundiata's strategy and legend turned the tide. Samunguru was defeated, his army scattered. The Mali Empire was born, laying the foundation for one of Africa's greatest golden ages, a time when libraries flourished, trade thrived, and kings like Mansa Musa ruled with unmatched wealth and wisdom. This battle wasn't just a military win, it was a spiritual awakening, a rebirth of a people. 12. The Battle of Bambazi, the fall of the Ndebele Kingdom. Zimbabwe, 1893, Ndebele versus British South Africa Company. In 1893, British settlers hungry for gold and land moved into Matabele land, the home of the Ndebele Kingdom. King Lobengula tried to negotiate, but the British had another plan. At Bambazi, over 1,700 Ndebele warriors confronted a column of settler forces armed with Maxim machine guns. It was a slaughter. Thousands of Ndebele died. Their spears and shields were no match for the guns of empire. Lobengula's kingdom was destroyed. His people scattered. The land and its wealth was taken. And the Ndebele resistance became another silent story in the long, bloody book of colonial conquest. 13. The Xand Rebellion, black slaves who shook the Islamic world. Southern Iraq, 869 to 883 C. East African slaves versus Abbasid Caliphate. It wasn't in Africa, but it was Africa that rose. In the marshes of southern Iraq, thousands of East African slaves, forced to work in brutal salt mines and palm plantations, rebelled against the mighty Abbasid Caliphate. For 14 years, they fought. They built cities, established governance, defeated multiple caliphal armies. This was the Xand Rebellion, a forgotten revolution of Africans who said no to oppression in a foreign land. Though eventually defeated, their courage sent tremors through the Islamic world. They proved that dignity knows no chains. 14. Battle of Angelot. Africans in the fight against the Mongols. Palestine, 1260 Mamluks, including Africans, vs Mongols. The Mongols had never been defeated. They had crushed empires across Asia and the Middle East, until they reached Angelot. There, Mamluk forces, a military caste that included thousands of African-born warriors and commanders, made their stand. And for the first time in history, the Mongols were defeated in open battle. A huge turning point in global history, and Africans were in the front lines. They weren't slaves. They weren't servants. They were generals, and they helped save the Middle East from Mongol domination. Conclusion. Never forget the blood and the bravery. From the jungles of Congo to the deserts of Sudan, from the mountains of Ethiopia to the rivers of Zimbabwe, Africa has bled. But Africa has also fought back. These battles weren't just about land. They were about freedom, dignity, survival. The world may try to erase these stories, but hey, on Real African History, we'll write them in flame and stone. These warriors were not victims. They were resistors. And through their stories, we rise again. As we reflect on these powerful battles across Africa, let us remember the brave men and women who stood their ground against all odds. They fought not just for territory, but for freedom, dignity, and the soul of a continent. Their courage still echoes through time, reminding us that Africa's history is filled with strength, resistance, and unshakable pride. Now it's your turn to speak. Which of these battles shocked you the most? Which one should we explore deeper in our next episode? Drop a comment. Let your voice echo with theirs. Like this video to honor the forgotten heroes. Subscribe to never miss a truth they don't teach in school. And share this with someone who still thinks Africa was just colonized peacefully. Because history isn't just what happened. It's what we choose to remember. Until next time, remember the battles they tried to erase, and the warriors who refused to be forgotten. Thank you for watching Real African History.